Hey guys, what's going on? Tumo Cruz here, checking in with...
Today's
We're here with Thuong checking in Nagoya, Japan, and we're on our way home. And on today's video, we're going to be talking while we ride about how we came to Japan. So how I came to Japan from America, how she came to Japan from Vietnam. We get asked this question all the time on our channel. We've been living here in Japan for 5 years and we make videos here about cycling, life in Japan. So if you're interested in either of those things, be sure to subscribe. And it's really cold out here right now, so we're gonna hurry up and get started with our ride.
let's go.
Let's go. And today is gonna be a little bit of a longer video. It's a long story, so I'll be leaving some timestamps down below, as always, for your convenience. For anyone new to the channel, my name is Cruz. I'm American from Metro Detroit in Michigan, and I've been living here in Japan for just about 6 years. I'm coming up on my anniversary right now. And I'm married to my wife, Thuong, who's Vietnamese. We've been married for about 3 years now. Actually, our wedding anniversary is coming up. And we both love cycling. It's one of the things that connects us here, and we love cycling here in Japan. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about how did we get to Japan? So for people who are interested in our story, and also people who are interested in making the leap to Japan, I want to talk about those things in today's video and aim this video towards you guys. So hopefully this video can help inspire and motivate and help people who are interested in making the move to Japan by talking about our experiences. So first I'll talk about my experiences and how I came here, and then we'll be talking about her experiences and how she came here, and what is generally required and what are the difficult things and difficult hurdles for how to get over here to Japan. For me personally, I first came over here actually as a study abroad student. So I actually changed my major a lot in my undergraduate studies. I started as a biology major, I changed to a mathematics major, I changed to a second education major, and eventually graduated with a business and accounting degree. So during that time, in my last year of university, I started taking a Japanese class and I really enjoyed it. I took it as an elective because my roommate wanted to take it and he didn't want to take it all alone, so I joined him in the class. And I've made some videos talking about how I learned Japanese and some of the difficult things that I struggled with in learning Japanese. So if you're interested in that video, in that story, I'll leave that video link up above so you can check that out. So anyway, long story short, I ended up studying abroad in Japan for 1 semester, and that's how I first came over here. Growing up, I was never really interested in going to other countries. Like I had ambitions as a cyclist. I wanted to become a professional cyclist and race over in Europe. But in terms of like living in other countries, I never was really interested in that. But I did want to try studying abroad once to get that experience out of the way. And coming here as a study abroad student is very different than coming here as a worker. They're completely different experiences. And also one of them costs money to come here. The other one, you actually make money coming over here. And how much you make, how much you save really depends on you and your situation. There's a nice little dog park down here, by the way. Everyone's enjoying the nice sunny weather. It is really cold today, and we're cycling along. This is the Shonai River. Always some nice river cycling paths here in Japan. But anyway, back to the story. I came here first as a study abroad student for 1 semester, and then I went back to the US. I started my working life, and then I went to graduate school. And I actually went to graduate school focusing more on website development and design and that kind of stuff. And I was thinking to get it into a career in programming, making websites. So actually making websites is a big hobby of mine. I have a website that I made specifically for learning Japanese. So if you're interested, check out jlptsensei.com. I make a whole bunch of different lessons on there about learning Japanese, and from what I've learned, like sharing that with other people. I really enjoyed making websites. And actually when I was in my graduate school, there was a huge population of Japanese students. So I ended up becoming friends with them and speaking Japanese with them. I was able to improve my Japanese talking to them. And through those connections, I decided to go and visit Japan once again. So my second time in Japan, I came as a tourist. And during that time, I somehow landed a job interview at a school while I was here. One of my friends who was living over here at the time, their school had an opening. Actually, it was a university position, and they were looking for people to fill the position. So I ended up applying for the position. At the time, I wasn't even really considering moving to Japan. I had my whole plan of continuing my career as a web developer in the US. Like, that's a pretty good salary in the US, a pretty good career, pretty good benefits. And I didn't really have any intentions on coming to Japan to work or coming to Japan to live, but I decided to apply for the position because it sounded like a good offer. They had long vacations, long summer break, long winter break, and the salary was like decent. It wasn't anything too special, but I half-heartedly applied for the position and I ended up getting it and decided that I wanted to come over here. And the reason I chose to come over, granted I am really privileged coming from the US where we have some really good salaries depending on the industry that you're in. And I was very fortunate my whole life to have those opportunities. But at the same time, I felt that my Japanese studies weren't completely over, and there were still some things I wanted to learn and experience about Japan, about Japanese culture, about the language. I didn't feel fully comfortable with my Japanese language abilities yet. I felt that there was still room for me to improve. I didn't want to give up halfway, and I felt the best way for me to accomplish this was to move to Japan, experience life there, and continue my language studies, and that was the best way to solve all these things that I wanted to do. So I decided that my career could wait. I can always go back and start my career again. If I came to Japan for 2 years, 3 years, even up to 5 years, I can still come back to the US, pick up where I left off, continue my career as a web developer. And that was the plan, at least before I came here. I had no intentions at the time of becoming like a permanent English teacher. And that's another thing you need to consider when you come over here to Japan. So no matter what your profession is, the main ticket, the main entrance ticket to get into Japan is English teaching. This is true for probably 90% of native English teachers. It's very difficult to get your first position over here in Japan in the industry that you're focused on. That's changing now as more industries are becoming more open to hiring foreigners, like foreign engineers, in the aviation industry, in the car industry, and also foreign web developers are becoming more in demand here. So for me personally, I still had goals with the language. I wanted to become fluent in speaking Japanese, and I felt where I was at that time, I was getting pretty close to fluency in Japanese, but there was a little bit more, another step that I needed to take. And there was also more I wanted to learn about the culture, about the lifestyle in Japan, and I wanted to experience Japan from the perspective of someone working there. And also teaching English sounded like a fun opportunity, so I decided to follow up on that job offer, and the contract was for about 4 years. So my plan was to move to Japan for those 4 years and then come back to the US and continue my career as a web developer, or possibly I could pass the JLPT, which is the Japanese language proficiency test, and find a job in Japan if I ended up liking the culture there, if I ended up liking living there. I kept that as a possibility. So I like keeping all options on the table, and that way I can set myself up for a better future. But the initial plan was to come to Japan, experience it, and just not to have any regret. I think that was the biggest motivating factor that made me decide to go. Like, it's a big decision to move countries. It's a big decision to move anywhere. If you're moving from one state to another state, but to move from a nearby country to another nearby country, that's one thing, but to move to a whole nother continent across the other side of the world and give up everything that you have, separate from all your friends, all your family, everything that you know, and be isolated in the other side of the world, that was a pretty big decision. But the biggest thing for me that helped make that decision very clear in my mind was, if I don't do this, if I don't take this opportunity, will I regret it later in life? Had I continued my original path of just full-time web developer, I'd probably be much more financially well off right now, much closer to retirement, and have a stable career with actual decent income. So from a financial standpoint, maybe the choice that I took wasn't the best one, but I didn't make this decision from a financial standpoint. I didn't do it for financial gain, which is quite different than why my wife came over here to Japan. And again, this is why I say I'm very privileged. Where I came from America, from a more middle-class income family, and I never had these kinds of concerns. So I realize my thinking on this matter is quite different than maybe some of the other people who are watching this channel, because we've got people who watch this channel from all over the world, all types of different backgrounds, and people come here to Japan for different reasons. So from my perspective, I'm speaking from someone who comes from America, maybe someone from like England, Australia, a native English speaker from a country with a pretty decently strong economy. But again, the biggest motivating reason for me to come here was just I didn't want to regret not taking the chance. And I realized that the longer I delayed this decision, the more difficult it would be to make this decision later in life. So like I mentioned before, you have to separate from your family, you have to separate from your friends. You're going to this whole new environment. And that's a lot easier to do when you have less responsibilities. So the more things you have, for example, if you are buying your own house, if you have a really expensive car and you're paying car payments on that, if you have children, the more connections you have, the more responsibilities you have, the more difficult it is to make a move. And I'm learning that especially right now, because now I'm married. I got married to my wife here, and that's one other big responsibility I have. So whenever I make a decision to do something in the future, it's not just me, it affects her as well. So if you get older, you have a family, you have a wife, you have a child, if your parents are getting sick and you need to take care of them, you don't have the freedom, you don't have the luxury to just do whatever you want. And I realized that if I'm gonna go, now's the time. I'm not gonna have this opportunity again later in life, and the longer I wait, the more difficult this is gonna be. So there might be some of you guys who are watching who are in a similar situation, and if you're wondering whether you should go or not, from my perspective, from what happened in my situation, I decided I didn't want to regret it later in life. And if I ended up not doing this, like, yeah, I can come back to Japan and I can have money from my normal career, come back and come visit Japan every year or so, do a vacation. And some people may be satisfied with that. But for me, I'm happy with the decision that I made. There's no correct answer that's the same for everyone. Everyone's going to be different. But in my situation, I'm glad I came here. I ended up becoming fluent in Japanese. I passed the JLPT. I actually only took it one time, but I passed the N2, which is the second highest level on my first try. I could probably pass the N1 right now. I used to work for a Japanese company. I was the only foreign worker there. All my work was in Japanese, so I accomplished my goal of becoming fluent in Japanese. And I met my wife here unexpectedly, who's from Vietnam actually. She's not Japanese, but we speak Japanese together. I have another video about our story on how we met in case you're interested in that. And that's enough about my story on how I came here and my advice. Next, I want to talk about my wife's story a little bit. Before we continue on with today's topic, I want to thank today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform full of tons and tons of courses for learning new skills. And if you're thinking about moving to Japan, it's a great idea to study Japanese. And they have some awesome courses on here for beginner Japanese, learning the Japanese alphabet, and also learning some basic essential Japanese phrases. So for me personally, I think it's a great idea to study Japanese if you're considering moving to Japan. And even if you're not interested in taking up the challenge on studying Japanese, you can check out some other courses on here. They've got different cooking classes. My wife loves cooking, so she likes the Japanese cooking recipes on here. Whatever you're interested in learning, there's tons and tons of courses here on Skillshare, so check it out. The first 1,000 people to use our link in the video description box will get a free trial to their premium service, and you get full access to their full course library. So go check it out if you're interested. So let's ask Thuong-chan, why did Thuong-chan come to Japan? Okane hoshi.
Yeah, I want the money.
I want the money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I said, our reasons for coming to Japan are completely different. I came here for the experience, for challenging myself and just, learning the language. Like I said, a privileged reason. But she came here for money. 簡単だね、理由が。シンプルで。Yeah, so in Vietnam, the salaries are really low. 普通の大学卒業したら普通の1ヶ月の給料いくらぐらい？
一般はね、4万円。
4万円ぐらい? Yeah, if you're a college graduate in Vietnam, the average salary is about $400 to $500, depending on if you're in a big city or it's a normal area. So for Vietnamese people and other people in Southeast Asia, coming to Japan is a good opportunity to make more money and save up as much money as possible here. And they use that money to actually support their family back home. So my wife, she used to work here, and she'd work a lot of overtime. She was making about minimum wage here in Japan, which is about $8 an hour, $9 an hour, around that range. And that's pretty common here. They have the skilled intern program. They call it the Gino Jishusei. And yeah, they come over here, they work a lot of overtime. And it's good for the Japanese companies because they have a labor shortage now. And it's good for the people from the Southeast Asian countries. Actually, it's not just Southeast Asia. There's a lot from like Brazil as well, Peru, South America. But for right now, actually Vietnam is number one. They're the number one immigrants in Japan right now. So it's good for them as well because they can make money, save money, and they get a good head start compared to whatever opportunities they have back in their home country. And so with that base salary, with all that overtime, my wife was able to make about a bit over $2,000 a month, and she kept her living expenses as low as possible. She would split rent with her Vietnamese roommates, they'd cook meals together, and they'd just be working all the time. They wouldn't go out and play, and every month she was sending $1,000 back home to support her family back home in Vietnam, and her brother was doing the same thing in Taiwan. So they're both migrant workers working abroad, saving up money to support their families back home. So completely different stories. So that's the why for why my wife and I both came to Japan. Next, I want to talk about the how. So this is the part that I'm sure a lot of people are interested in. We're going to be crossing the street here. Got to be careful on these roads. There's no traffic lights, so the cars drive especially fast here. Here we go. Let's check out this nice sunset view over the river real quick. So the next part, we're going to be talking about the how. How did we get to Japan? And first I'll talk about my wife's story, since we're continuing with her right now. And I'll talk about myself next, how I came. We're going to turn left here. Oh wow, they paved this road. This is really nice now. This used to be my old commuting route. All right, so for my wife, there's actually a lot of recruiters in Vietnam that search for people, Gino Jishuse, skilled technical interns, to participate in this program. And they have to pay a lot of money up front. 日本に来るためいくらぐらい払った？125万円ぐらい。So she had to pay about $12,000 just for the privilege of coming to Japan to work for minimum wage. That to me is insane. And she got a 3-year contract from that. And from that contract, she's making about $2,000, $2,500 a month with overtime, which to me, it's just so different compared to my situation. Like, again, I'm just really privileged as a native English speaker coming from America, and we both came to Japan. Our situations are completely different. But not only did she have to pay that money, she had to go to a Japanese school. So she was in Japanese language school in Vietnam for about a half year. And during that time, she wasn't guaranteed a position. She actually had to interview with different companies. So different shacho, or presidents, company presidents from Japanese companies will go to these recruitment centers in Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries, depending on what staff they want from what countries. They go to these recruitment centers and then they'll interview the people that are studying there at the school. And sometimes they make the decision based on the appearance of the candidates. They'll choose the most beautiful women. And sometimes they choose the people with the most impressive Japanese ability. So there's an incentive for them to learn the language, which is good because they want to prove that they can speak Japanese, they can communicate with their coworkers, they can do the work that they are required to do and understand the instructions. So luckily, my wife studied really hard. She was able to improve her Japanese really quickly. And she also is a decent looker, so she passed the interview, fortunately, pretty quickly. But some people, I think, are stuck in those schools for a long time before they get accepted, and they're wasting all this time and money before they are accepted. So that's the story of how my wife came to Japan and why she came to Japan. And let's continue with the how for me. So how did I come to Japan? And for me, the how was much simpler. I didn't have to pay any crazy recruitment fee or anything like that. I applied on my own for the position, and we're gonna go under this tunnel here. I applied on my own for the position. I didn't have to pay any recruitment fee or anything like that. And I did the whole interview for the job on Skype. I submitted all my paperwork online. I did the interview on Skype. And that was pretty much all there was to it. Oh, that lady is doubling those bikes up this hill. We're making our way back up here to the river path. So we've talked about the why did we come to Japan. We've talked about the how did we come to Japan. Next, I want to talk about some advice we have for people who are interested in moving to Japan, what we think is most important. Oh, there's the train going on right now. And I'm really excited. We're testing this out with a new 360 camera right now, so we get all the different angles. So again, our situations are very different. My wife coming from Vietnam, me coming from America. So let's hear what Thuong has to say. Does she have any advice? Okay.
日本で何にもあるから何でもあるからあんまり持ってこなくていいよ。じゃあ
Don't bring anything.
いっぱい持ってきた。ラーメンとか米とかいっぱい持ってきて。でも日本で安いし美味しいからいらない。
Okay. So that's interesting advice. I hadn't thought about that. So she says to pack light. You don't need to bring too many things with you when you come here. You can start fresh. You can get everything new here. And when she first moved over here, she brought a bunch of food. She was really worried. She brought some different ramen from Vietnam, so Vietnamese ramen, which is pho. Yeah, you can buy all those things here in Japan. There's the image that Japan is really expensive, and in some places that's true, like Tokyo rent. But in general, like food and clothes aren't too expensive if you know the right places to shop. It's really affordable here, so you can start fresh. And yeah, don't worry about bringing too much stuff here. I think the less you bring, actually, the more you can experience here. You can experience going to those different stores. You can experience buying those new things and starting fresh. And I think that'll be a really nice new experience. I personally only came here with one suitcase and one bicycle. So my setup was pretty lightweight, actually. And I really didn't want to get that many new things because the more I bought, the more it was going to become difficult to leave later on. And I was really good about that for the first few years before I met my wife. But after meeting my wife here and we moved to a bigger apartment, we just bought a bunch of stuff and we bought a bunch of different bicycles. So now it's getting impossible for us to leave. Any other advice? Don't worry. Okay. So we're gonna go down here on the secret route. Let's test out how this camera does on these rough roads. How's the stabilization, guys? And now we're here down by the bottom of the river path. This part is nice because we can go underneath the bridges. So Thuong's last advice was just, yeah, don't overthink it. Don't get worried when you're coming over here. Japanese people are nice and things will work out. So that's my wife's advice. And now for the advice for me. I would say that if you want to do something in life, you need to take action. And if you don't take action, you're going to regret it later in life. So for me personally, I don't want to live a life of regret, and I make a lot of decisions with that mentality. So I came to Japan because I didn't want to regret not coming to Japan. I knew I would take a financial hit. I knew my financial opportunities would be much less here, and I was okay with that because I would rather take the financial hit than regret not coming here, not experiencing this, and not becoming fluent in Japanese. And it's the same thing with marrying my wife. When I first met my wife here, before she became my wife, when we were just dating here, there was this awesome girl. She could cook really good food, and she really liked cycling, and it was really fun hanging out with her. And I knew that for us to stay together, there weren't that many options, and it would be a huge decision. And we actually got married within like a half year of meeting each other and first starting dating, which is pretty ridiculous. I always thought that I would need to know someone for at least like 3 years and live together for a long time before knowing that she's the one and that we can get married. And I always thought that way my whole life, but after I met her, I knew that like she's the one, and if I don't propose to her, I would regret it for the rest of my life. And that's how I made that decision. I knew that I wanted to be with her. I knew that I wanted to continue riding bikes together and staying in Japan together. So yeah, I didn't want to regret it. So for me, my advice is, if you want to come to Japan, make it happen. You're the only one who can do it, and waiting isn't going to help solve the problem. There's a lot of good things in living in Japan. There's a lot of negative things about living in Japan. No country is perfect. We made a whole video talking about the reasons why different foreigners mostly end up leaving Japan. And we're also in a similar situation where we likely will be leaving Japan in the next few years. Even though we both might leave Japan, I'm still happy that we came over here. I still don't regret anything. I'm very grateful I came over here. I'm very grateful I became able to speak Japanese meet all the people that I've met over here, expand my horizons, expand my perspectives. I wouldn't change it for anything else in the world and any other path that may have been available to me. I'm glad I made the decisions I did. I'm glad I came here to Japan, and I hope this video was helpful to you guys if you're wondering or thinking about the same things. And before we wrap up this video, I want to say one last time that I realize not everyone's situation is the same, and I'm very privileged to be in the situation that I'm in, that I didn't have any big responsibilities before making the decision to come to Japan. But in the end, it's your life and you choose what you want to do. So if you want to eventually come to Japan, whether it be as a tourist, whether it be as a worker, whether it be as a student, you're the one who makes the decision. You're the one who creates your own path in life. And if you want something to happen, you got to make it a goal and you got to act on it. Anyway, guys, that about wraps up all of our thoughts on this topic. If there are some other questions that you have that we didn't answer in today's video, leave them down below in the comments and I'll try and get to them as soon as we can. If you are interested in starting to learn Japanese, I've added a link in the video description box for the beginner Japanese course on Skillshare, and you can use our link to get a free trial for a couple weeks of free classes on their website. And remember, this is limited to the first 1,000 people, so be sure to click the link down below to get your free trial. And before you leave, we'd appreciate it if you give this video a nice big thumbs up. That's it for today, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you next time here on Thuong Cruise. Bye-bye. Oh, also, please let us know what you think of this new camera. This is a 360 camera, and we can capture all these different angles, even this giant plane that's going above us right now. Check that out.
近いね。
近いね。
ヘリコプターじゃない。
ヘリコプターじゃない。飛行機だよ。
ちっちゃいね。